My name is Sandra, and I'm a 19-year-old college student living in Seattle. My story, though it may seem ordinary at first glance, is anything but. It begins with the death of my father and an inheritance that would change everything. When I was 13, my parents divorced. It was a painful and confusing time for me. My mother, Linda, did her best to shield me from the worst of it, but the emotional distance between us grew. Then, a few years later, my father passed away unexpectedly. He left behind a substantial inheritance of $10 million, which I could only access when I turned 19. It was a sum that promised financial security, but I had no idea how it would stir up trouble. By the time I reached 19, I had just begun to settle into college life, enjoying the freedom and new experiences it offered. Living with my mom and my stepfather, Ron had become a routine. Ron had been married to Mom for 6 years, and though I had tried to get along with him, there was always a tension that hung in the air. One afternoon, while I was studying in my room, Ron knocked on my door. He looked unusually serious. "Sandra, we need to talk," he said. I put down my book and followed him to the living room. Ron sat down on the couch, his expression stern. "I know you've recently come into a significant amount of money from your father's estate," he began. "Your stepbrother, Jake, needs financial help for college. I think it would be best if you considered giving him a portion of your inheritance to help cover his tuition." The request took me by surprise. Jake, who was 21 and in his third year of college, had never shown much interest in being part of my life. The thought of just handing over a portion of my inheritance seemed unfair and rushed. I had worked hard to manage my finances and was planning for my future. "I'm sorry, Ron," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I don't think it's fair for me to give Jake my inheritance. I've planned to use it for my own education and future needs." Ron's face tightened. "Sandra, you don't understand. It's not just about fairness, it's about family. We've been trying to support Jake, and this could make a huge difference for him." I shook my head. "I still don't think it's right. I need to think about my future too." Ron's demeanor shifted from pleading to aggressive. "You're being selfish. This money was meant to help you, but you could use it to help your family. Don't make me force this issue." I felt a chill run down my spine. His words and the way he spoke were menacing. "You can't just tell me what to do with my inheritance, and I don't want to discuss this further right now." Ron's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell your mother about this conversation," he warned as I walked away. "It's between us." The unease that settled over me grew heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling that Ron's insistence on my inheritance was more than just concern for Jake's education. Something about his behavior seemed off. I decided to investigate. Late one night, when everyone was asleep, I quietly accessed Ron's computer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I had to find out why he was so intent on my money. As I scanned through his emails, my heart raced with every new message I opened. My suspicion proved correct. I found emails between Ron and a woman named Carla, discussing not only their plans to divorce my mother, but also cryptic references to a shady business deal. My hands trembled as I read through the messages. They mentioned something about money laundering and potentially drug-related activities. The more I read, the more horrified I became. The next morning, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I knew I had to confront Ron and Jake. I needed to protect my inheritance and my mother from whatever Ron was planning, but how? I decided to record a conversation with them, hoping to gather evidence that would prove Ron's deceitful intentions. When Ron and Jake were in the living room, I walked in, trying to appear casual. "Hey, can I talk to you guys for a moment?" I asked. I slyly turned on my phone's recording feature as I took a seat. Ron seemed uncomfortable but agreed. "What's on your mind, Sandra?" "I just want to understand why you're so adamant about me giving my inheritance to Jake," I began. "What's going on?" Ron shifted in his seat. "Sandra, we've talked about this. Jake needs this money, and it's only fair." Jake nodded in agreement, though his face was expressionless. "Yeah, Sandra. It's not like we're asking for the whole amount." I kept pressing, trying to get Ron to slip up. "I've been doing some thinking. Maybe I should check things out more thoroughly before making any decisions." Ron's patience wore thin. "Sandra, you need to trust us. We're looking out for you." I'm just trying to be cautious, I said, feigning innocence. I'll think about it. As I left the room, I felt a sense of impending confrontation. I had enough evidence to raise serious questions. What I didn't know was how deep Ron's deceit went and what it would take to protect my family and my future. In the days that followed, I was consumed by worry. The conversation with Ron and Jake had left me feeling uneasy, but I knew I couldn't let it go. I needed to dig deeper. The recordings I had made provided no immediate proof of wrongdoing, so I decided to investigate further. While Linda, my mother, was away on a work trip, I found myself alone with Ron and Jake. It was a perfect opportunity to search through Ron's things, hoping to uncover more about his shady dealings. I spent hours sifting through files on his desk and searching his personal computer. One evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, I made my move. I returned to Ron's computer, which was left unattended. My heart pounded as I navigated through his email accounts and documents. I had hoped for something concrete, anything that would reveal Ron's true intentions. After some time, I stumbled upon a thread of emails between Ron and Carla. The messages were filled with coded language about transactions and cleaning up money. It was clear that Ron and Carla were involved in something illicit. The emails mentioned laundering money and hinted at connections to drug trafficking. The more I read, the more I realized the gravity of Ron's schemes. My hands shook as I copied the emails to a flash drive. I needed to have undeniable evidence, so I also took screenshots of key documents and financial statements linked to Ron's shady business. It was a risk, but I had to act quickly before Ron discovered I was snooping around. The next step was to gather more information about Ron's involvement with Carla. I decided to follow Ron one day when he claimed he was going to a business meeting. I trailed him discreetly, my heart racing with every turn. My intuition led me to an old warehouse on the outskirts of Seattle, a place that seemed out of place for a typical business meeting. From a distance, I saw Ron enter the building with a briefcase. I waited for hours, my anxiety mounting. When Ron finally emerged, he seemed more agitated than usual. I made a mental note of the warehouse's location and the time he left. The next morning, I confronted Jake. I knew he was involved in some way and needed him to reveal more about Ron's activities. "Jake, can we talk?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I need to know what's going on with the inheritance." Jake looked at me with a blank expression. "We've been through this, Sandra. It's about helping the family." "I'm not sure I believe that," I said, pressing on. "I've been finding out more about Ron and Carla. There's something not right." Jake's face hardened. "Sandra, you're overreacting. You don't know what you're talking about." I didn't press further, but I noted his defensiveness. The conversation confirmed my fears. Ron had manipulated Jake as well. I knew that confronting Ron directly wouldn't work. I needed my mother to be involved to see the truth. I decided to gather all my findings and present them to Linda, but how would she react? She was away on a business trip, and I had to be careful about how I approached her. Finally, I managed to reach Linda via phone. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important. It's about Ron and the inheritance." Linda sounded concerned. "Sandra, I'm busy with work. Can't it wait until I get back?" "I don't think so, Mom. It's urgent," I insisted. "Please just listen to what I have to say." Reluctantly, Linda agreed to a call later that evening. I gathered all the evidence I had, copies of emails, screenshots of documents, and notes from my surveillance. It was time to show her what I had uncovered. When the call came, I presented the evidence to Linda, speaking as clearly and calmly as I could. "Mom, I've discovered something disturbing. Ron and Carla are involved in illegal activities, including money laundering and possibly drug trafficking. Here's the evidence." Linda listened in stunned silence. "Sandra, I don't know what to say." "I know it's hard to believe," I said, "but I need you to look at these documents and see for yourself." Linda promised to review everything and get back to me. The waiting was agonizing, but I had done all I could for now. My mother's reaction would be crucial in determining the next steps. The truth was out there, but whether she would believe it was a different matter. The following days were filled with tension. I anxiously awaited Linda's response to the evidence I had sent her. I hoped she would see the truth in my findings and act on them. The weight of the situation was almost unbearable, And every time my phone rang, my heart leaped, expecting it to be my mother. One afternoon, Linda finally called. Her voice was tight with emotion. Sandra, I went through the documents and emails you sent me. I can't believe it, but it looks like you're right. Ron and Carla are involved in some serious illegal activities. Relief and dread mingled in my chest. What are we going to do, Mom? I'm hiring a private investigator, Linda said firmly. We need to confirm everything before we take any action. I'll be back in Seattle soon. True to her word, Linda returned a few days later with a private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Kate. Kate quickly got to work examining the evidence I had gathered and conducting her investigation. She followed Ron's activities and scrutinized the warehouse I had spotted. As the days passed, the tension in our house became palpable. Ron was increasingly suspicious of my behavior. He kept asking about my interactions with Linda and seemed on edge whenever he was around me. Jake, on the other hand, continued to act like nothing was wrong, though his demeanor was guarded. Linda and Kate's investigations soon bore fruit. Kate confirmed that Ron and Carla were indeed involved in money laundering and had ties to drug-related activities. Armed with this new evidence, Linda and I knew it was time for a confrontation. We planned our move carefully. One evening, we gathered in the living room with Ron and Jake. Linda, her voice steady despite her obvious anger, started the conversation. Ron, Sandra, and I have discovered some things about your activities that we need to discuss. Ron's face hardened. What are you talking about? Linda calmly placed a folder of evidence on the table. We know about your affair with Carla and your involvement in illegal schemes. The private investigator has confirmed everything. Ron's face turned pale as he glanced at the documents. You have no proof. This is all nonsense. I have plenty of proof, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And it's not just the documents. We know about the money laundering and the drug connections. Jake, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke. Ron, is this true? Ron shot him a warning look. Jake, stay out of this. The tension was electric as Linda and I waited for Ron's reaction. He seemed to weigh his options, and then his face twisted with rage. You think you can just accuse me and get away with it? You're the one who's been lying and manipulating us. You're not going to get away with this, Linda said. Ron's anger reached a boiling point. He stood up abruptly and advanced toward me. You should have stayed out of this, Sandra. I'll make sure you regret this. Before Ron could act on his threat, Kate, the private investigator, stepped forward and flashed her badge. Ron, we have enough evidence to have you arrested. I suggest you cooperate. Ron's bluster faltered as he realized the seriousness of the situation. This is a setup, he mumbled, but his bravado was gone. Linda, her eyes full of resolve, addressed Ron one last time. You have two choices. Turn yourself in, or we'll make sure the police get involved. Ron's face contorted with defeat as he realized the game was up. The confrontation had been intense, but now that the next step was clear, the police would be notified, and Ron's fate would be decided. As Ron left the room, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a surge of relief. We had taken a significant step toward justice, but the situation was far from over. The coming days would bring more challenges, but at least now we were on the path to exposing the truth and seeking justice. The confrontation with Ron marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, but it wasn't the end. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and personal turmoil. Linda and I worked closely with the authorities, providing all the evidence we had gathered. The situation felt surreal as we watched Ron's empire of deceit crumble. The day the police came to arrest Ron and Jake, I could hardly believe it. I stood in the living room, watching through the window as the police car pulled up. My heart raced as officers escorted Ron and Jake out of the house. Ron's face was a mix of anger and humiliation, while Jake looked stunned and confused. Linda and I had to stay composed throughout this process. We provided statements to the police and attended meetings with lawyers. The legal system moved swiftly. The evidence was overwhelming, and Ron's attempts to deny his involvement only made things worse. News of the arrest spread quickly, and soon Ron was facing charges not just for money laundering and drug-related crimes, but also for his affair with Carla and the plans to divorce Linda under pretenses. Linda and I were determined to stay strong despite the emotional toll. We knew we had to see this through. The courtroom drama was intense, but watching Ron being held accountable for his actions was a form of closure. The hearings were covered by local media, and it became clear that Ron's reputation was in shambles. He had gone from being a respected figure in the community to a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. During the trial, Linda made the difficult decision to file for divorce. It was a painful process, but she knew she couldn't remain married to someone who had betrayed her trust in such a profound way. The divorce proceedings were finalized, and Linda felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It was a significant step toward reclaiming her life and moving forward. After the trial, the relief we felt was palpable. The nightmare was finally over, and Ron's criminal activities were exposed for all to see. Jake faced legal consequences as well, though his role was less significant compared to Ron's. He seemed to come to terms with the reality of his situation and accepted responsibility for his part in the scheme. With the legal battles behind us, Linda and I began to focus on rebuilding our lives. The trauma of the past months had brought us closer together. We spent more time together, talking about our hopes and dreams for the future. The bond between us, strengthened by adversity, became a source of comfort and strength. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to a new normal. Linda and I found solace in each other's company, and we worked on restoring a sense of peace and stability. We even began to make plans for the future, looking forward to a life free from the shadows of deceit and manipulation. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized how crucial it had been to stand up for the truth, despite the fear and uncertainty. Facing the situation head-on had led to justice being served. It wasn't just about the inheritance or the legal battle, it was about reclaiming our lives and ensuring that integrity triumphed over deceit. As we moved forward, Linda and I found joy in the simple things, our shared moments, our renewed trust in each other, and the promise of a brighter future. We were stronger and more resilient than ever, having faced the darkest aspects of our family dynamics and come out on the other side with our dignity intact. In the end, Sandra and Linda were not just survivors of a treacherous ordeal, but symbols of resilience and the power of standing up against manipulation and betrayal. The journey had been arduous, but it taught us invaluable lessons about trust, integrity, and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity.